We just spent $6,000 on a rebuilt engine for this 80 series Land Cruiser, and it already has a knock. We've done all of our due diligence, and we know that we did everything right as far as all of our torque specifications, but we need to diagnose this knocking sound because we can't live with that and something might catastrophically fail. So today what we're going to be doing is diving in and seeing if we can't use a stethoscope and just look at all of our bolt-on accessories and try and determine where the sound is coming from. We went to a machine shop after we've had this running for a little while, and it runs great. The guy at the machine shop said it's not a death knock sound, it's most likely something in the valves or something with the accessories. So what we've already done is we've ran the engine without the belts or without any of the accessories or any load on the front here. We made sure the crank pulley was torqued down to the proper specification, which is about 300 foot-pounds, but there's still a little bit of a ticking sound. Now that the engine's warmed up, we can kind of tell, we can hear that the knocking sound's coming from the front of the engine area. So the way to diagnose this would first be to check your valve clearances, which we've already done, but the valves are all good, all the shims are within spec. This is just a simple stethoscope you can get at Harbor Freight or any AutoZone store for relatively cheap, around $10. This cylinder head uses a dual overhead cam bucket over shim style valve set. So we've already checked all of our valve clearances on all of our shims and we're within spec there. We have a pretty strong reading coming from the front of the engine here, so we're going to start by removing the power steering bump since it is gear driven and see if we can't find a chipped tooth. After pulling out this power steering pump, there was no chipped tooth on the gear. We started it up and there was still the same knocking noise, unfortunately. Running out of things to diagnose, we decided to take the oil pump housing off and check that and see if any of the gears were messed up. None of them were. After putting everything back together, it still had the same sound and we were kind of frustrated. We called the Land Cruiser shop and still haven't gotten a response in a few weeks, unfortunately. We had purchased this engine from the Land Cruiser shop and it cost $6,000, and for that price you'd expect it to be no problems, working in good condition. It's possible that we did something wrong when we were putting it together, but just to clarify, this engine was rebuilt by another shop, and I believe the crank had been sent out to another shop in Texas or something and assembled by somebody in Spokane, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not quite, it's kind of unclear on how it was all assembled finally, but it is pretty disappointing. I mean, to have paid this much for an engine and not have it be running, you know, like it's brand new, like it should be for that price. Again, you know, that's a hefty price. I think that's about the average though for a rebuilt long block. Obviously we need all of our accessories from the old Land Cruiser, but still trying to rack my brain to figure out if we did something wrong. We put it on the engine stand here, bolted it to our Harbor Freight engine stand via the bell housing bolts. There's a few different ways you can mount this onto the 4 arms that go on the mounting bracket for the swivel. We just decided on those ones. It definitely appeared that everything was pre-oiled, or, you know, they had assembly lube on everything. I inspected all the crank journals, the rods. One thing I didn't do was check all of these rod connecting bolts for torque. Probably should have done that, but, you know, again, you'd expect it to be done, but maybe that was our fault for not checking that. So we reinstalled the oil pan and, you know, continued to get the accessories put on. So this is the white Land Cruiser we posted in the last couple videos ago with the bad engine. So we've taken that engine out since, found a brand new long block. So I've been helping a little bit with this, but my dad's been pretty much assembling it by himself. So I'll go ahead and let him take the reins on what he's done.
I've done everything. New water pump. Reinstalled the distributor, cleaned it up. New plugs, wires, everything all set up real nice. Cleaned the intake. Got it all nice and clean. Wiring harness was in good shape. One little knock sensor had broken, so I rewired it together with a new knock sensor wire. New split loom on the transmission cables. Got the cable completely out, heat taped up here.
This is that problematic area where some people have issues where they'll start getting shorts or issues with their injectors because of the heat from the EGR valve.
EGR delete on here and up here.
So yeah, it's basically just a block off plate. Wits End made a keychain so it could be legal to block the EGR, which is the exhaust gas recirculation, going back into the intake manifold. Here's the plate on the back side. Basically what we did is we used an EGR gasket for a template and then just cut it out of some aluminum. And then for your vacuum lines, you can just make a loop here, or you could do ball bearings if you want. Or since the whole EGR system has been deleted, we just made a U there. This is the HUD Expo kit. It uses a 4.1 ohm resistor that goes inside this female connector. So this satisfies the ECU requirement so you don't get the P0401, which is the EGR insufficient flow. And then there's one, I think that's probably a M8.
The temp sensor.
Yeah, this is the temp sensor. So there's another plug, an M8 by 125, I believe, that goes in there with some Teflon tape.
And put the ball bearing in this, and I just put a little cap over it to make it look nice.
Nice. Yeah, so
a couple of the fuel injectors were, the little clips or tangs were broken, so I just zip tied them so she would never fall off.
Yeah, and that happens when these are 30 years old and they get hot and brittle from being next to a cast iron block for 30 years. So you got the Mishimoto rubber or silicone coolant hoses for all of your heater hoses and all of that. So that's all going to be brand new and it looks kind of nice. When I removed my engine in the old Land Cruiser for the Cummins swap, I didn't have as many issues as we had with this one because I was pulling the transfer case with it. Even with a load leveler, it only took maybe about an hour to finagle it. It is definitely pretty difficult in order to get all the bell housing bolts in, and tightening down is a different story. It definitely helps to put the motor mounts in beforehand. We figured it out the hard way, but it is what it is. If you have access to another jack, you can manipulate the transmission transfer case, and that helps you to line up the bolt holes a little bit better. It's still relatively difficult. From here, pretty much all you need to do is remove the inspection cover on the transmission and then bolt up your flex plate bolts and start plugging sensors in. For about 20 minutes, we couldn't get it to even crank, and we couldn't figure it out. It ended up being the oil pressure sender wasn't plugged in. So at this point, we'd really like to hear back from the Land Cruiser shop before we take it apart. We are hoping that there's some sort of warranty that they'll guarantee, because at this point we are kind of at a loss. The only thing that I can think of is that a rod bolt wasn't tightened down enough, or the machining on the crank wasn't done properly, and this is leading to some sort of minor knock. These engines can make a lot of different knocking and ticking noises, but if any of you have heard of any of these noises coming from your engine in the past, comment down below and let me know if you found what the solution was.